How dare you touch my violin? Do you have any idea what oils from your fingers could do to an instrument of this value? Victoria's voice cut through the rehearsal hall like a knife, drawing all eyes to Marcus standing beside her prized Guarneri. But what this elite opera director didn't know was that the man she was publicly humiliating had overcome more than just her prejudice to reach this stage. What would happen when this talented black musician finally got his chance to play? Would Victoria's world come crashing down when she discovered who Marcus Reynolds really was? The confrontation at Wellington Opera House was about to expose the painful reality many talented musicians face when they don't fit the traditional, classical music mold. You won't believe the emotional performance that left an entire audience in tears and changed everything. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Reynolds stared at the crisp ivory envelope in his hands, the gold-embossed logo of the Wellington Opera House gleaming under the dim light of his apartment. His hands trembled slightly as he read the invitation again, an audition for first violin in one of the country's most prestigious orchestras. "Mama, it's happening," he whispered into his phone, his voice catching. "The Wellington Opera House wants to hear me play." "My boy," Mrs. Evelyn Reynolds' voice crackled through the speaker, filled with pride. "God is opening doors that no man can shut." Marcus smiled, running his fingers over the raised lettering. At 32, he had almost given up on breaking into the elite classical music scene. Despite his Juilliard education and undeniable talent, doors kept closing. "It's next Thursday. I'll be praying, baby. Your daddy might not show it, but he's proud too." Marcus chuckled. "Daddy still thinks I should have become a doctor. He just wanted security for you. Music's been a hard road." Marcus shifted in his seat, wincing as a familiar pain shot through his lower back. The chronic injury, a remnant from his childhood, always flared when he was stressed. "You're back acting up again?" His mother's voice softened with concern. "It's manageable." He didn't mention he'd been standing during practice sessions, unable to sit for more than 20 minutes without searing pain. "I've been doing the stretches. Have you seen that specialist I mentioned? Health insurance doesn't cover it, Mama. But after this audition, maybe things will change." Later that evening, Marcus carefully removed his violin from its case, not the finest instrument, but one his mother had purchased through years of double shifts as a hospital aide. He'd named it Esperanza. Hope. As he positioned it under his chin, the familiar comfort washed over him. When he played, the pain in his back seemed distant, secondary to the music flowing through him. He began with Bach's Chaconne, the piece he planned for his audition. His fingers danced across the strings with practiced precision, but it was the emotion he poured into each note that transformed the small apartment into a concert hall. When he finished, sweat beading on his forehead, his phone buzzed with a text from his father, "Good luck with that fancy audition. Still got that accounting application on my desk if you change your mind." Marcus smiled wryly. Some things never changed. He placed Esperanza back in her case and pulled out the Wellington brochure, studying the photo of Victoria Wellington, the opera's formidable director. Her stern expression and perfectly coiffed silver hair exuded authority and old-world refinement. "Just give me a chance," he whispered to her image. "That's all I need." His back throbbed as he stood, a sharp reminder of why he sometimes played standing even during practice. The memory threatened to surface, the classroom, the teacher, the pain, but he pushed it away. Not tonight. Tonight was for hope. The nightmare came that night, as it often did when his back pain flared. Young Marcus, just 11 years old, walked cautiously into the music classroom at Westfield Academy. The private school scholarship had been a miracle, a chance for a boy from his neighborhood to receive the education his parents had dreamed of providing. "You're early," Dr. Eleanor Blackwood said, not looking up from her desk. Her aristocratic features remained impassive, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, clutching his second-hand violin case. "I wanted to practice before class." Dr. Blackwood nodded curtly. Practice room C is available. But practice room C had no chair, just a music stand. His back already ached from carrying heavy textbooks. After 15 minutes of standing, the pain became unbearable. He returned to the main classroom, now empty as Dr. Blackwood had stepped out. The teacher's chair, plush, ergonomic, and forbidden to students, stood behind her desk. Marcus hesitated, then sat down, sighing with relief as the pressure eased from his spine. He lifted his violin and began to play, losing himself in the music. He didn't hear the door open. "What do you think you're doing?" Dr. Blackwood's voice sliced through the melody like a knife. Marcus jumped up, his bow clattering to the floor. "I'm sorry, Dr. Blackwood, how dare you sit in my chair?" Her face contorted with rage. "Who do you think you are? My back was hurting, and I just needed your back. Your back." She grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the door. "You think you're special? You think the rules don't apply to scholarship students?" "No, ma'am, The first strike of the wooden ruler across his lower back shocked him into silence. The second brought tears to his eyes. "This will teach you respect." 5 more blows followed, each harder than the last. Marcus bit his lip until he tasted blood, determined not to cry out. When she finished, his back was on fire, but the humiliation burned hotter. "Now get out," she hissed. "And if you ever touch my things again, you'll lose that scholarship faster than you can pack your violin." Dr. Blackwood never reported the incident. When his mother noticed his wincing days later and discovered the bruises, her tearful confrontation with the school board was met with skepticism. "Dr. Blackwood is a respected educator with 30 years of experience," the principal had said. "Perhaps your son misunderstood the situation." They offered to investigate, but nothing came of it. The unspoken message was clear: be grateful for the scholarship and don't make waves. Marcus remained at Westfield. His parents couldn't afford to refuse the opportunity, but he never sat in Dr. Blackwood's classroom again, standing through years of lessons despite the growing pain. The damage was more than physical. 2 slipped discs eventually healed improperly, leaving him with chronic pain, but the psychological wounds cut deeper. In elite musical spaces, he always felt like an intruder, waiting to be punished for taking up space that wasn't meant for him. Marcus awoke from the dream gasping, his sheets soaked with sweat. The familiar ache in his back throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Dawn light filtered through his blinds as he reached for his pain medication. 1 week until the audition. He wouldn't let the past destroy this opportunity. "Not this time," he whispered, pressing his palm against his lower back. "Not this time." The Wellington Opera House loomed before Marcus, its neoclassical columns and grand marble steps announcing its importance to the world. He adjusted his tie, his father's, borrowed for the occasion, and gripped his violin case tighter. Inside Esperanza lay not just an instrument but years of dreams, sacrifice, and determination. The lobby buzzed with activity as musicians prepared for auditions. Marcus noted he was one of only 3 black performers among dozens of candidates. A familiar weight settled in his stomach, the burden of representing more than just himself. "First time at Wellington?" An older Asian man with kind eyes approached, gesturing to Marcus's awestruck expression. "That obvious, huh?" Marcus smiled. "I'm Marcus Reynolds. Thomas Chen, 3rd violin. Been here 20 years. He lowered his voice. "Word of advice, Victoria likes precision over passion, but the true magic happens when you deliver both." Before Marcus could respond, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations hushed as Victoria Wellington herself entered, flanked by assistants. Her tailored charcoal suit and perfectly coiffed silver hair projected authority. She scanned the room with critical eyes, briefly pausing as they landed on Marcus. "Candidates for strings, practice rooms are downstairs. Auditions begin in 30 minutes. Her British accent clipped each word precisely. "Remember, we are seeking excellence. Nothing less." As the crowd dispersed, Victoria approached a young female violinist, admiring her instrument with obvious approval. Ah, a Guarneri. Beautiful craftsmanship. Marcus moved toward the stairs but froze when Victoria called out, "You there, with the case." He turned. "Yes, ma'am. That case has seen better days." Her gaze flicked dismissively over his worn violin case, adorned with a small black Lives Matter pin. "I do hope what's inside matches the caliber this institution demands." Heat crawled up Marcus's neck. "Esperanza has never let me down yet." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You named your violin? How quaint." She turned away before he could respond. Thomas appeared at his side. "Don't mind her. She's like that with everyone, well, almost everyone." In the practice room, Marcus tried to focus, but his back screamed for relief after the long subway journey. No chairs were available, so he leaned against the wall, playing softly to warm up. A young woman with copper hair entered, watching him with undisguised interest. "Your vibrato is incredible." "I'm Sophia." "Marcus." "Thanks, but I'm still working out the nerves." "Aren't we all?" She smiled. "Victoria has that effect. Last violinist who messed up, she asked if they'd confused Paganini with Pagliacci." Marcus chuckled despite his anxiety. "Brutal. She reserves special treatment for those she considers unconventional additions." Sophia's expression said what her words didn't. "You mean black musicians?" She nodded. "The board's been pushing for diversity. Victoria's been pushing back." "Great." Marcus rolled his shoulders, wincing. "Injury?" "Old one. Standing too long makes it worse, but sitting through performances can be." He trailed off as an attendant appeared. "Marcus Reynolds. You're up." The audition room intimidated by design. 5 judges sat behind a long table, Victoria at the center, her pen poised to record every flaw. "Mr. Reynolds," she began, consulting his resume with pursed lips. "Juilliard graduate, yet your performance experience is limited." "I've focused on teaching while pursuing orchestral opportunities," Marcus answered, the practiced response tight in his throat. "Indeed. Well, let's see if your playing justifies your ambitions." Bach's Chaconne, from the beginning. Marcus positioned Esperanza, ignoring the pain radiating through his lower back. The first notes emerged tentatively, but as the music flowed through him, the room disappeared. He poured everything into the piece, his mother's sacrifices, his father's pragmatic doubt, Dr. Blackwood's cruelty, and his own unwavering belief that he belonged here. When the final note faded, silence filled the room. Marcus lowered his violin, suddenly aware of his rapid breathing. "Technically proficient," Victoria said finally, though perhaps overly emotional for Bach. "The piece requires mathematical precision, not theatrical interpretation." Marcus bit back a defense. Bach's music contained universes of emotion beneath its mathematical structure. "Can you sight read this?" She held out a sheet of music, a trap, he realized, as he scanned the complex modern composition. He played it through, making only 2 minor errors despite the deliberately difficult passages. Victoria's expression revealed nothing. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We'll be in touch." Outside, Thomas waited. "How'd it go?" "Hard to tell. She called me theatrical." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Coming from Victoria, that's almost a compliment. She noticed something beyond the notes. Sophia appeared, beaming after her audition. "They're announcing callbacks tomorrow morning. Drinks tonight to celebrate surviving." For the first time that day, Marcus felt a genuine smile break through. "I could use one." As they walked toward the exit, he caught Victoria watching him, her expression inscrutable. Whether he'd earned a place or not, he'd played his truth. For today, that had to be enough. The Wellington Opera House boardroom crackled with tension. Victoria Wellington stood at the head of the mahogany table, her posture rigid as she addressed the 7 board members. "I've presented my recommendations for the new orchestra members," she said, tapping the folder before her. These selections represent the highest caliber of musicianship befitting our institution. Charles Harrington, the board chairman, adjusted his glasses. Your selections are impeccable as always, Victoria. However, he exchanged glances with other members. We've noticed a certain homogeneity in your choices. Victoria's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. I select based on merit alone. Of course, said Maria Gonzalez, the newest board member. But we've discussed our commitment to reflecting the diversity of our city and audience. The Wellington has lagged behind other major companies. I won't compromise artistic excellence for political correctness, Victoria snapped. No one's suggesting that, Charles replied smoothly. But several candidates from underrepresented backgrounds scored exceptionally well. Marcus Reynolds, for instance. Victoria's lips thinned at the name. Mr. Reynolds plays with technical adequacy but lacks discipline. His interpretation of Bach was overwrought. Yet 4 of the 5 judges rated him in the top percentile, Maria noted, opening her own folder. His sight reading was nearly flawless. Nearly isn't flawless, Victoria countered. Charles sighed. Victoria, our donors are increasingly concerned about the opera house's public image. The Wellington Fellowship specifically funds positions for musicians of color. So I'm to admit him because of grant requirements? Victoria's voice dripped with disdain. You're to admit him because he earned it, Maria said firmly. His audition scores speak for themselves. A tense silence followed before Victoria relented with calculated grace. Very well. I'll add Reynolds to the roster. But I maintain my reservations. Later that afternoon, Marcus stared at his phone in disbelief. The email was formal but clear. He had been accepted as a violinist with the Wellington Opera House Orchestra. His hands trembled as he called his mother. Mama, I got in, he said, voice breaking. I actually got in. Mrs. Reynolds' joyful cry filled his ear. My baby. I knew you would. Oh, we have to call everyone. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Marcus cautioned, even as elation surged through him. It's just a beginning. After promising to visit soon, he ended the call and sat quietly, letting the reality sink in. Years of rejection, of being told he didn't quite fit with what orchestras were looking for, had left their mark. This victory felt almost surreal. His phone rang again, Thomas Chen. Congratulations, young man. I just saw the roster. You too? I thought you were already permanent. Thomas chuckled. Even after 20 years, Victoria makes us all audition when contracts renew. Keeps us humble. Sophia made it too. That's great. Marcus smiled, genuinely pleased for his new friend. There's a welcome reception tomorrow evening, Thomas continued. Fair warning, Victoria may have been overruled on some selections. She doesn't take that gracefully. Marcus's stomach tightened. You mean me? A pause. Let's just say the board has been pushing for change. Victoria prefers tradition. Great, Marcus sighed. So I'll be walking into a hostile environment from day one. Not hostile, just challenging. Victoria respects skill above all. Prove yourself indispensable. After they hung up, Marcus carefully lifted Esperanza from her case, feeling a new weight of responsibility. This wasn't just about him anymore. His success or failure would affect opportunities for others who looked like him. We did it, old friend, he whispered to his violin. Now we just have to show them they made the right choice. He placed the acceptance letter on his small kitchen table, next to a bottle of pain medication. The chronic ache in his back served as a reminder of obstacles already overcome. Victoria Wellington might not believe he belonged in her orchestra, but he'd spent a lifetime proving people wrong. Tomorrow would be another test. Another chance to demonstrate his worth in spaces not designed for him. The familiar pressure settled on his shoulders, heavier now, but no less bearable for its weight. He was ready. The first rehearsal began at precisely 9 o'clock. Marcus arrived 30 minutes early, determined to make a positive impression despite Victoria's obvious reservations. The rehearsal hall, a soaring space with perfect acoustics, was already half filled with musicians tuning their instruments. Sophia spotted him and waved him over. "You survived the reception," she teased, referring to the previous evening's awkward event where Victoria had greeted him with frigid politeness before immediately turning her attention elsewhere. "Barely," Marcus replied, setting up his music stand. "I've never seen someone so skilled at looking through a person." "That's Victoria's specialty," Thomas said, joining them. "Don't take it personally. She once made the principal cellist cry because his bow tie was askew." The murmuring conversations died as Victoria entered, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. She carried herself with the authority of someone who'd never questioned her right to be in any room. "Good morning," she addressed the orchestra. "We begin preparation today for our fall program. Tchaikovsky, Brahms, and Bach. I expect nothing short of perfection." Her gaze swept across the musicians, lingering momentarily on Marcus. "Some of you are new to the Wellington standard. Let me be clear, your continued position depends entirely on your performance." For the next 3 hours, Victoria drove them relentlessly. Marcus's back began to throb after the first hour of sitting, but he refused to show discomfort. He played with precision, watching Victoria for approval that never came. "Violins, measure 84, Victoria called out. "Again. Mr. Reynolds, your timing is a fraction behind." Marcus rechecked the passage, he'd been perfectly on tempo. Several other musicians exchanged glances. "Yes, Ms. Wellington," he responded evenly, refusing to be provoked. "Again," she commanded. And with less embellishment this time. They repeated the passage 6 times before Victoria moved on to criticize another section. By the time they reached their break, Marcus was clenching his jaw so tightly his temples throbbed. "She's testing you," Thomas murmured, offering him a bottle of water. "She does this to see if new musicians can handle pressure." "Does she test everyone equally?" Marcus asked, stretching discreetly to ease his back pain. Thomas's silence was answer enough. When rehearsal resumed, Victoria announced, "We'll run through Bach's air on the G string. First chairs, prepare for solo passages." As they played, Marcus lost himself in the music, the familiar melody a balm to his frayed nerves. For a moment, he forgot the pain, forgot Victoria's scrutiny, forgot everything but the conversation between his bow and strings. When they finished, Victoria said, "Adequate for a first attempt. Mr. Reynolds, your vibrato is excessive. This is Bach, not romantic sentimentality." "Bach wasn't a mathematical robot," Marcus responded before he could stop himself. "His music breathes with human emotion." The rehearsal hall went silent. No one contradicted Victoria Wellington. She fixed him with an icy stare. "When I want musical theory from a junior violinist, Mr. Reynolds, I'll ask for it. Until then, play as directed." The remainder of the rehearsal passed in tense silence. As musicians packed up afterward, Sophia whispered, "That was brave. Stupid, but brave." "I shouldn't have said anything," Marcus admitted, wincing as he stood. "Are you okay?" Thomas asked, noticing his discomfort. "Old injury. Sitting too long aggravates it." Thomas nodded sympathetically. Victoria respects musicians who stand by their artistic convictions, eventually. Just tread carefully until then. As Marcus left, he noticed Victoria watching him, her expression unreadable. The battle lines had been drawn. He'd have to play every note perfectly while managing his pain and navigating the politics of an institution that viewed him as an unwelcome addition. The weight of it all pressed down on him, heavy as the chronic pain in his spine. But he'd endured worse. One day at a time. 3 weeks of daily rehearsals had taken their toll. Marcus sat on the edge of his bathtub, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to reach the center of his back with a heating pad. The pain had escalated from a persistent ache to sharp, stabbing spasms that occasionally left him breathless. "Just need to get through tomorrow," he muttered, swallowing another over-the-counter pain reliever. The bottle was nearly empty, the third this month. He'd developed strategies, standing whenever Victoria wasn't watching, leaning against walls during breaks, and applying numbing cream before and after rehearsals. But the constant sitting, the tension of Victoria's relentless criticism, and the pressure to prove himself worthy had aggravated his old injury beyond its usual limits. As he finally eased into bed, his phone buzzed with a message from his mother. "How's my orchestral star? Dad and I are saving for tickets to your first performance." Marcus smiled despite the pain. "Doing great, Mama. Learning so much. Love you both." The white lie tasted bitter, but he couldn't worry her. Not when she'd sacrificed so much for him to reach this point. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories. He was 13 again, standing in Dr. Blackwood's classroom, his back already throbbing from the previous day's lesson. "Mr. Reynolds, your posture is atrocious," Dr. Blackwood snapped, circling him like a predator. "Stand up straight." "Yes, ma'am," young Marcus replied, forcing his spine to straighten despite the searing pain. "Now play Mozart's Symphony No. 40. First violin part." For 20 minutes, she made him repeat the same passage, never allowing him to sit, even as tears formed in his eyes from the effort of remaining upright. "Mediocrity is not tolerated in classical music," she declared to the class. "Excellence requires sacrifice." The other students avoided his gaze, relieved not to be the target of her scorn. When class ended, Marcus collapsed in the hallway, unable to walk to his next lesson. The school nurse called his mother, who rushed from her hospital job still wearing scrubs. "Baby, what happened?" she asked, cradling him. "Nothing," he whispered, ashamed. "Just my back again." The MRI revealed 2 slipped discs. The doctor recommended rest and physical therapy, neither of which Dr. Blackwood would accommodate. "If he can't meet the requirements, perhaps the Westfield Academy isn't the right environment for him," she had told his parents, her voice dripping with false concern. His father had wanted to withdraw him immediately. "No fancy music program is worth this." But his mother understood what the scholarship meant for his future. "We'll find a way," she promised, holding him close. "You just keep playing your beautiful music." Marcus awoke with a gasp, his sheets soaked with sweat. The nightstand clock read 3:17 a.m. Rehearsal would begin in less than 6 hours. He forced himself to stand, shuffling to the bathroom where he stared at his reflection. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked exhausted, and the Wellington season had barely begun. "You can do this," he told his reflection. "You didn't come this far to quit now." Morning arrived too quickly. At rehearsal, Victoria seemed especially determined to find fault with his playing. "Fortissimo means with strength, Mr. Reynolds, not with abandon," she critiqued. Again, from measure 42. Marcus reset his bow, adjusting his posture to relieve the pressure on his spine. As he played, a sudden spasm shot through his lower back, causing a microsecond hesitation. Victoria's hand shot up, stopping the orchestra. "Mr. Reynolds, if you cannot maintain proper timing, perhaps you should practice more before joining our rehearsals." "I apologize, Ms. Wellington," he said, his voice steady despite the fire raging along his nerves. "It won't happen again. See that it doesn't." During lunch break, Marcus retreated to an empty practice room, carefully lowering himself onto a piano bench. He couldn't risk taking more pain medication, it dulled his reflexes and sensitivity to the music. "Just breathe through it," he whispered, attempting the relaxation techniques his physical therapist had taught him years ago. A soft knock interrupted his solitude. Thomas entered with concern etched on his face. "You're in pain," the older musician observed. "I recognize the signs." Marcus started to deny it, then sighed. "Old injury. Bad one." Thomas nodded. "Music extracts its pound of flesh from all of us eventually. I have arthritis in both hands." He wiggled his gnarled fingers. 30 years of violin will do that. "How do you manage?" "Adaptations. Treatments. Most importantly, knowing when to rest. Thomas studied him. Victoria won't respect limitations she doesn't know about. Victoria barely tolerates my existence, Marcus countered. If she knew I had physical limitations, she'd use it as an excuse to replace me. Perhaps. Or perhaps she'd respect your determination to play through pain. Thomas rose to leave. Just remember, no performance is worth permanent damage. Not even at the Wellington. As Thomas left, Marcus carefully stretched, fighting back another wave of pain. The memory of Dr. Blackwood's voice echoed in his mind, excellence requires sacrifice. But how much sacrifice was too much? And for the first time, he wondered if proving himself to Victoria Wellington was worth the price his body was paying. Hold still, Sophia commanded, applying a menthol-based ointment to Marcus's lower back in the empty practice room. This helped my dance injuries in college. Marcus winced as the cooling sensation penetrated his inflamed muscles. Thanks for this. I was at my breaking point yesterday. Why haven't you told Victoria? The Wellington has accommodations for medical issues. You really think she'd accommodate me? Marcus laughed bitterly. She's looking for any excuse to say I don't belong here. Sophia capped the ointment tube. You're being paranoid. Victoria's tough on everyone. Not like she is with me. You don't see it because, he stopped himself. Because I'm white. Sophia finished, eyebrow raised. I'm not blind, Marcus. I've noticed how she scrutinizes you differently. I just think your injury gives you legitimate grounds to request accommodation without risking your position. Marcus pulled his shirt down. My experience says otherwise. Sophia sat beside him. Want to talk about it? The injury, I mean. He hesitated, then told her about Dr. Blackwood, the chair, the ruler. With each detail, the knot in his chest loosened slightly. He hadn't shared the full story with anyone outside his family. When he finished, Sophia's eyes glistened. That's assault. She should have been fired. The word of a scholarship student against a venerated teacher. In that world? Marcus shook his head. I learned early which battles I could win. Not all classical musicians are Eleanor Blackwood or Victoria Wellington, Sophia said firmly. Some of us actually believe talent matters more than background. The practice room door opened, and Thomas entered with his violin. Plotting revolution? He asked cheerfully. Just trading war stories, Marcus replied, grateful for the interruption. Sophia was showing me her miracle ointment. Ah, the secret arsenal of aging musicians. Thomas settled into a chair. I have quite the collection myself. Sophia checked her watch. I should go. Sectionals in 10 minutes. She squeezed Marcus's shoulder. Think about what I said, okay? After she left, Thomas tuned his violin with practiced ease. She's right, you know. About accommodations. I didn't realize our conversation had an audience, Marcus said dryly. These walls are thin. Thomas played a quick scale. 20 years ago, I hid my arthritis, afraid they'd replace me. When it became unbearable, I finally told Victoria. And she arranged for heat treatments before performances and adjusted my schedule. Thomas smiled at Marcus's surprise. Victoria is complicated. Prejudiced in some ways, yes. But she respects dedication to the craft above all else. She respects musicians who look like you, come from backgrounds like yours, Marcus countered. Thomas lowered his violin. My first day at Wellington, Victoria asked if I'd be more comfortable in an ethnic orchestra. I considered quitting on the spot. Marcus's eyes widened. What did you do? I played Paganini's Caprice No. 24 without a single error, then told her I was comfortable anywhere excellence was the standard. Thomas chuckled at the memory. She never made such comments again. Times have changed, Marcus argued. She can't be openly racist now, but the sentiment remains. Perhaps. But Victoria's greatest flaw isn't racism, it's her terror of becoming irrelevant. Thomas leaned forward. She sees musicians like you as harbingers of change, threatening her control over an art form she believes should remain frozen in amber. So I represent everything she fears, Marcus said, understanding dawning. Precisely. And fear makes her cruel. Thomas played a melancholy phrase. The question is, will you let her fear define your experience here? Before Marcus could answer, the door opened again. An auburn-haired cellist he recognized as Catherine entered. Sorry to interrupt, she said. Thomas, can I borrow your rosin? Mine shattered. Of course. Thomas handed her a small case. Catherine smiled at Marcus. You're the new violinist everyone's talking about. I heard you put Victoria in her place about Bach. Marcus groaned. Has that story reached everyone? Pretty much, she laughed. Many of us silently cheered. Victoria's interpretation of Bach is notoriously sterile. She returned the rosin to Thomas. We're having drinks after rehearsal tomorrow. You should join us. After she left, Marcus raised an eyebrow at Thomas. Everyone's talking about me. For better or worse, you've made an impression. Thomas returned to tuning his violin. Catherine represents the younger faction of the orchestra, those who believe the Wellington needs modernization. And the older faction? Some resist change, certainly. Others simply keep their heads down. Thomas shrugged. But many quietly support fresh perspectives, even if they won't publicly challenge Victoria. For the first time since joining the Wellington, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he wasn't as isolated as Victoria wanted him to believe. So I might have allies after all, he mused. More than you realize, Thomas confirmed. Just be careful. Victoria doesn't forgive those who challenge her authority directly. The warning hung in the air between them as they prepared for rehearsal, but Marcus carried a new lightness despite his physical pain. He wasn't alone in this fight, and that knowledge made all the difference. The Wellington's annual donor showcase was approaching, heightening tension throughout the orchestra. Victoria prowled the rehearsal hall like a general inspecting troops before battle, critiquing everything from posture to breath control. Excellence is not optional, she reminded them daily. The Wellington's reputation, and your continued employment, depends on perfection. For Marcus, each rehearsal became an exercise in endurance. The pain medication barely touched his discomfort now, but he refused to let it affect his playing. He'd found unexpected allies in Sophia, Thomas, and other musicians who offered small gestures of support, a saved seat with better back support, shared anti-inflammatory bombs, and subtle nods of encouragement when Victoria's criticism became particularly pointed. After a grueling 6-hour session, Victoria announced, "That's all for today. First violins, review measures 90 through 120. Your timing was abysmal." As musicians began packing away their instruments, Marcus remained seated, gathering energy for the painful process of standing. Most days, he waited until the hall emptied before attempting to rise, avoiding concerned glances. "Mr. Reynolds," Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. "My office before you leave. I wish to discuss your performance." Heat crawled up his neck as heads turned. A private criticism session, Victoria's favorite method of undermining confidence. "Yes, Ms. Wellington," he replied, keeping his expression neutral. Thomas caught his eye and offered a sympathetic grimace as he left. When the hall finally emptied, Marcus gripped his chair arms and pushed himself upright, exhaling sharply through the pain. Victoria's office reflected her personality, immaculate, traditional, with no personal touches except for framed awards and a glass display case containing her prized violin, a 1735 Guarneri del Gesù worth millions. Rumor held that she rarely played it anymore, keeping it more as a status symbol than an instrument. She wasn't there yet. Marcus stood awkwardly, knowing sitting without permission would only antagonize her further. A practice room connected to the office through a partially open door. Drawn by the soft glow illuminating the case, Marcus approached the Guarneri. Its warm amber varnish glowed under the display lights, its craftsmanship representing the pinnacle of violin-making artistry. "Beautiful," he whispered, leaning closer. The display case wasn't locked. Without thinking, Marcus carefully opened it, drawn by a lifetime of reverence for such instruments. He didn't touch the Guarneri, wouldn't dare, but leaned in to examine the legendary F-holes and scroll work. "What do you think you're doing?" Victoria's voice sliced through the room, so similar to Dr. Blackwood's that Marcus jerked backward, sending pain shooting through his spine. "I was just looking. Step away from my violin immediately." Victoria rushed forward, closing the case with trembling hands. "How dare you?" "I didn't touch it," Marcus explained. "I was admiring the craftsmanship." "Admiring?" Victoria's face contorted with rage and something else, fear. "You think someone like you can appreciate an instrument of this caliber? This violin has been played by masters for generations." The implication hung heavy between them. "Someone like you." "I've studied Guarneri's work extensively," Marcus replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "His instruments are renowned for their darker timbre compared to Stradivarius." "Don't presume to lecture me on violin history," Victoria snapped, positioning herself between Marcus and the case as if he might grab the instrument and flee. "This Guarneri has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather played it for kings." "It deserves to be played," Marcus said quietly. "Not imprisoned in a case." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "I protect this instrument from damage. From contamination." "From music, you mean?" The words escaped before he could stop them. "How dare you?" Victoria's voice carried through the open door into the hallway, where several musicians lingered after rehearsal. "First, you touch my personal property without permission, then you have the audacity to criticize how I care for it." "I didn't touch. I saw you. Hands practically on my family's legacy." Victoria was shouting now, drawing a small crowd at the doorway. "Do you have any idea of the damage oils from your fingers could cause to an instrument of this value?" Marcus felt a familiar sensation washing over him, the same helpless rage he'd experienced in Dr. Blackwood's classroom years ago. Different woman, same accusation, "You don't belong here." "I know precisely how to handle fine instruments," he said, voice dangerously quiet. "I may not come from money, Ms. Wellington, but I graduated from Juilliard. I've played instruments worth more than my life." "Yet you carry a factory-made violin in a case held together with tape," she sneered, gesturing to Esperanza's worn case propped against the wall. Something snapped inside Marcus. "My instrument was purchased with my mother's overtime shifts as a hospital aide. Its case shows the journey I've taken to reach this point, a journey people like you try to block at every turn." Gasps came from the doorway. No one spoke to Victoria Wellington this way. "People like me?" Victoria's voice dropped to a glacial tone. "You believe I object to your presence because of your race? How predictably convenient. I believe you object to anything that challenges your narrow vision of what classical music should be and who should play it." Marcus stood taller despite the pain radiating through his back. "You hide behind tradition to justify exclusion." Victoria's face paled with fury. "You're here because the board insisted on their diversity initiative. Not because you belong in this orchestra." The gathered musicians fell silent. Victoria had finally said aloud what had only been implied. "I'm here because I can play," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "I earned my place despite people like you and Dr. Blackwood trying to convince me otherwise." "Who?" "My childhood teacher who beat me for sitting in her chair, giving me the back injury I still suffer from. Another guardian of tradition who believed people like me weren't worthy of classical training." Victoria's expression flickered for an instant before hardening again. "Your personal history doesn't interest me, Mr. Reynolds. What concerns me is your disrespect for boundaries and authority." "And what concerns me," Marcus said, picking up his violin case, "is an institution that values preservation over progress. Music isn't meant to be locked away. It's meant to be shared, to evolve, to live." He turned to leave, aware of the watching eyes, the whispered conversations that would follow. "Mr. Reynolds." Victoria called after him. If you walk out now, consider your position forfeit. Marcus paused in the doorway, pain and indignation warring within him. Walking away meant surrendering everything he'd worked for, everything his parents had sacrificed to achieve. But staying meant accepting Victoria's vision of his place in this world, tolerated but never truly accepted. Perhaps, he said without turning, we both need to reconsider what we're willing to sacrifice for music. With that, he walked through the parting crowd, each step an agony of both body and spirit. Marcus's apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in as he paced despite the searing pain in his back. 3 days had passed since his confrontation with Victoria. 3 days of unanswered calls from Thomas and Sophia. 3 days of silence from the Wellington administration. His phone rang again, his mother this time. He couldn't ignore her any longer. "Hey, Mama," he answered, forcing cheer into his voice. "Marcus James Reynolds," she replied, her tone indicating she wasn't fooled. 3 days you haven't returned my calls. What's wrong?" "The dam broke." Words poured out, Victoria, the violin, the ultimatum, his walkout. When he finished, silence hung on the line. "You stood up for yourself," she said finally, pride evident in her voice. "Just like your father taught you." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Dad taught me to be practical. Walking out on the biggest opportunity of my career wasn't practical." "Your father taught you dignity comes before dollars," she corrected. "Now, have you been officially dismissed?" "Not yet. But after challenging Victoria publicly, then you still have a job until someone says otherwise." Her voice took on the no-nonsense tone that had gotten their family through countless challenges. "Rest your back today. Tomorrow, you return to rehearsal with your head high." "Mama, it's not that simple." "It never is. But running away ensures you lose." Her voice softened. "When that teacher hurt you years ago, I wanted to snatch you from that school. Your father said the same thing I'm telling you now, walking away lets them win." The memory hit him with surprising force, his father's hands on his shoulders, voice firm but gentle. "You belong in that school as much as any child. Don't let them convince you otherwise." "I'll think about it," Marcus promised. After they hung up, he carefully lifted Esperanza from her case, seeking comfort in her familiar weight. As he positioned the violin under his chin, a sharp knock interrupted. Marcus opened the door to find his father standing there, travel bag in hand. "Dad?" Marcus stepped back in shock. "What are you doing here?" William Reynolds, tall and dignified even in his work clothes, entered with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Your mother called. Said you might need some perspective." "She sent you all the way to New York for that?" Marcus asked, genuinely surprised. His father rarely left their hometown, let alone travel to the city. Some conversations need to happen face to face. William surveyed the apartment, noting the pill bottles and heating pads scattered about. "Your back's acting up again." It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded. "Sit down before you fall down," William instructed, guiding Marcus to the couch. "When did you last eat?" "I'm not hungry." "Didn't ask if you were hungry. Asked when you last ate." The familiar exchange loosened something in Marcus's chest. While his mother had been his cheerleader, his father had always been his reality check, gruff but steadfast. After ordering takeout, William settled into a chair across from Marcus. "So, you walked out." "I lost my temper," Marcus admitted. "She implied I wasn't good enough to touch her precious violin." William was quiet for a moment. "Remember when you were 16? That music camp in Philadelphia?" Marcus nodded. It had been his first real exposure to advanced training outside school. "Camp director told me you had talent but lacked cultural refinement for classical music." William's expression darkened at the memory. "Suggested you try jazz instead." "You never told me that," Marcus said, surprised. "What good would it have done? You were already fighting battles I couldn't shield you from." William leaned forward. I wanted you to be a doctor or lawyer because those fields have clear paths. Measurable achievements. Less subjective judgment. But you never stopped me from pursuing music. Because that light in your eyes when you play. William shook his head. No parent has the right to extinguish that. But watching you struggle against these barriers year after year. Broke your heart, Marcus finished quietly. Made me damn proud, William corrected. Every time you got knocked down, you got back up. Stronger. More determined. Tears pricked at Marcus's eyes. I'm not sure I can get up from this one, Dad. Yes, you can. Because you're not just playing for yourself anymore. William nodded toward the violin case. Every note you play at that place opens doors for the next kid who looks like you. The food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence. Later, as William prepared the sofa for sleep, Marcus asked, "What if she fires me anyway?" "Then you'll find another orchestra. A better one." William's confidence was absolute. "But first, you make her say the words. Make her admit she's removing a talented musician for standing up to her prejudice." That night, for the first time since the confrontation, Marcus slept without dreams of Dr. Blackwood or Victoria Wellington. His father's presence acted as a talisman against old wounds and fresh anxieties. In the morning, they shared breakfast before William's return train. "Your mother wants updates," William said, embracing his son carefully, mindful of his back. "Daily ones." "Tell her I'm going back today," Marcus decided. "One way or another, I'll see this through." William nodded, approval evident in his expression. "That's my boy." After his father left, Marcus stood before his mirror, straightening his tie, his father's, left behind intentionally. The man in the reflection looked different somehow. More resolved. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Wellington Gala performance moved up. Emergency orchestra meeting this morning. Are you coming?" Marcus took a deep breath. Whatever happened next, he would face it with the dignity his parents had taught him. He sent a simple reply, "I'll be there." The tension in the Wellington's main rehearsal hall was palpable as Marcus entered. Conversations halted momentarily, then resumed with increased intensity. Thomas broke away from a cluster of musicians to intercept him. "You came," the older man said, relief evident in his voice. "Should I not have?" Marcus asked, scanning the room for Victoria. "Quite the opposite. We were hoping you would." Thomas guided him toward an empty corner. "There's been a development." Before he could elaborate, Sophia joined them, her expression a mixture of anxiety and excitement. "Marcus. Thank God. Listen, Jane Foster collapsed during yesterday's rehearsal. The lead violinist. Is she all right?" "Exhaustion and dehydration," Thomas explained. "She'll recover, but not in time for the gala performance." Marcus's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "That's 4 days away." "Exactly," Sophia confirmed. "Victoria's in a panic. The Wellington Anniversary Gala is our most prestigious event of the year. Every major donor, critic, and classical music influencer will be there. Normally, the second chair would step up," Thomas continued, "but Mitchell is in Tokyo judging a competition. The third chair lacks the technical ability for the solo passages. Which leaves." Marcus began. "You," Sophia finished. "Based on your audition scores, you're the most qualified violinist available." Marcus laughed incredulously. "Victoria would rather cancel the performance than let me take lead." "She doesn't have that option," Thomas said with grim satisfaction. "The board chairman made it clear, the gala proceeds as planned. It represents nearly 30% of our annual fundraising." Before Marcus could respond, the rehearsal hall doors opened. Victoria entered, her usual commanding presence diminished by visible stress. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally immaculate appearance showed signs of hasty preparation. She surveyed the assembled musicians, her gaze faltering briefly when it landed on Marcus. For a moment, he thought she might order him to leave. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and addressed the orchestra. As you've all heard, Jane Foster is indisposed. After consultation with the board, we've determined the gala must proceed. Her voice carried the enthusiasm of someone announcing a funeral. We need a replacement lead violinist capable of mastering the program in 4 days. The room fell silent, all eyes shifting between Victoria and Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, she said finally, his name clearly painful to pronounce. Your audition scores suggest you might be adequate for this emergency situation. Marcus maintained a neutral expression, though triumph surged through him. I'm familiar with the program, Ms. Wellington. Familiarity isn't mastery, she countered. The lead violin solo in Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto requires technical perfection and artistic sensitivity. The implication that he possessed neither hung in the air. I've performed it before, Marcus said simply. At Juilliard. Victoria's lips thinned. Very well. We begin intensive rehearsals immediately. The rest of you, take positions. As musicians moved toward their seats, Victoria beckoned Marcus to follow her. In the hallway, she turned to face him, her expression severe. Let me be perfectly clear, Mr. Reynolds. This is a temporary arrangement born of desperate circumstances. Do not interpret it as forgiveness for your behavior regarding my violin. I understand, Ms. Wellington. I doubt that very much. She studied him with cold calculation. One wrong note, one missed cue, and your time at Wellington ends permanently. The board may have mandated your inclusion, but they cannot force me to retain incompetence. Marcus met her gaze steadily. I won't disappoint the orchestra. See that you don't. She turned to re-enter the hall, then paused. By the way, you'll need a superior instrument for the performance. That factory violin won't project adequately for the solo passages. Marcus bristled. Esperanza has served me well for years. Sentiment has no place in professional music. Victoria's tone brooked no argument. The Wellington has several fine instruments available for loan. I'll have Thomas show you the collection. 4 hours of grueling rehearsal followed. Marcus played each note with precision, ignoring the growing fire in his back from prolonged sitting. Victoria criticized relentlessly, but even she couldn't deny his technical proficiency. During a brief break, Thomas approached with water and pain relievers he'd noticed Marcus needed. You're holding up remarkably well under the circumstances. I can't afford to show weakness now, Marcus replied quietly. Not when she's watching for any excuse. About the violin situation, Thomas began hesitantly. I've seen the instruments available for loan. They're adequate, but nothing exceptional. Better than factory-made Esperanza, according to Victoria. Thomas glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. There's something you should know. The board chairman will attend tomorrow's rehearsal with several major donors, a preview of sorts. If you impress them, Victoria becomes powerless to remove me, Marcus finished, understanding dawning. Precisely. But you'll need an instrument that showcases your true ability. Thomas hesitated. There's been a new development that might interest you. Before he could continue, Victoria called the orchestra back to order. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of music and mounting pain. By evening, Marcus could barely stand. As musicians departed, Thomas approached with surprising news. Victoria's violin was damaged this morning. The Guarneri? Marcus asked, shocked. How? A humidity control malfunction in the display case. The crack is small but requires immediate repair by a specialist. It won't be ready for the gala. She must be devastated, Marcus said, feeling unexpected sympathy. Regardless of their conflict, a musician's attachment to their instrument was sacred. She hasn't played it publicly in years, Thomas replied, but she intended to for the gala solo, tradition for the anniversary performance. Now she'll use her backup Violin. Marcus absorbed this information, unsure of its relevance until Thomas continued. Victoria's office is locked, but she left the practice room open for your additional rehearsal tonight. Her backup violin case is in there. You're suggesting I use Victoria Wellington's personal backup violin? Marcus clarified, disbelief evident in his voice. I'm not suggesting anything, Thomas said innocently. Merely mentioning that it's a magnificent instrument that would showcase your talents perfectly tomorrow. And that Victoria is dining with board members tonight and won't return until morning. If she found out, she'd be furious, Thomas acknowledged. But if you've already impressed the chairman by then. The proposition was outrageous, yet tempting. To play a violin of that caliber, even briefly. I need to think about this, Marcus said finally. Thomas nodded. The practice room is available until midnight. Whatever you decide, I'd recommend extra rehearsal tonight. Tomorrow could determine your future here. After Thomas left, Marcus sat alone in the empty hall, weighing his options. Using Victoria's violin without permission would be professional suicide if discovered prematurely. Yet the opportunity to truly showcase his abilities with a superior instrument was almost irresistible. His phone buzzed, a text from his father, "Remember who you are. Remember why you play." The simple message clarified his thoughts. This wasn't about Victoria or proving her wrong. It was about the music, it had always been about the music. Marcus gathered his things and headed for the practice room, decision made. The Wellington Anniversary Gala transformed the opera house. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over the audience, a who's who of wealthy patrons, notable critics, and classical music luminaries. Programs featuring Victorian-inspired gold embossing detailed the evening's performances, with a special note about the emergent talent Marcus Reynolds stepping in as lead violinist. Backstage, chaos reigned. Musicians adjusted bow ties and positioned sheet music while stagehands made last-minute adjustments to the lighting. Victoria paced like a caged tigress, snapping instructions at anyone who crossed her path. "Mr. Reynolds," she called sharply, spotting Marcus emerging from the practice room. "You're cutting it rather close, aren't you?" "Final preparation," he replied calmly, despite the anxiety churning inside him. The previous day's rehearsal with the board chairman had gone exceptionally well, perhaps too well. Victoria had watched with thinly veiled resentment as her superior commended Marcus's refreshing interpretation of Tchaikovsky. Victoria's eyes narrowed, studying his composed demeanor. "I don't see your violin. Where is Esperanza?" She infused the name with mocking emphasis. "I've accepted your advice about using a superior instrument," Marcus said. "Thomas helped me select one from the Wellington collection." Before Victoria could inquire further, the stage manager approached. "5 minutes, Ms. Wellington. Full orchestra in position, please." As musicians filed toward the stage, Thomas appeared at Marcus's side. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," Marcus replied, adjusting his collar. The formal attire felt restrictive, aggravating his back pain despite the additional medication he'd taken. "Remember," Thomas murmured, "this isn't just about proving Victoria wrong. It's about showing everyone what music can be when we break down the barriers of who's allowed to play it." Marcus nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "My parents are out there. Front row, the Wellington's guests." "Then play for them," Thomas said simply. "Play for everyone who helped you reach this moment." The orchestra took their positions, the anticipatory hush of the audience creating an electric atmosphere. Marcus settled carefully into the lead violinist's chair, positioning his borrowed instrument. Not Victoria's personal violin, he'd decided against that risk, but a finely crafted testor with warm, resonant tones. Victoria stepped onto the podium to polite applause, her expression a mask of professional detachment. Marcus caught her scanning the audience, her gaze pausing briefly on an elegant older woman seated near the front, a woman whose features triggered a distant memory he couldn't quite place. The first half of the program proceeded flawlessly, Mozart, Brahms, Debussy. Marcus played with technical precision, mindful of Victoria's warning about perfection. His back throbbed steadily, but the pain remained manageable as long as he maintained proper posture. During intermission, Sophia squeezed his arm encouragingly. "You're doing brilliantly. The critics are practically salivating." It's not over yet, Marcus reminded her. The Tchaikovsky solo is after intermission. You'll nail it, she assured him. Just like in rehearsal. When the orchestra reassembled, Marcus noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Word had spread about the extraordinary young violinist stepping in at the last minute. Opera glasses focused on him, program notes were consulted, whispers circulated. Victoria commenced the second half with Bach's air on the G string, the piece that had sparked their first confrontation weeks earlier. As Marcus played, he allowed himself the emotional interpretation he truly felt, rather than Victoria's sterile technical approach. The music soared, each note imbued with both precision and feeling. When the piece concluded, Victoria's glance held something new, grudging acknowledgement, perhaps. Then came Tchaikovsky's Violin Concerto in D major, the centerpiece of the evening. As Marcus prepared for his solo, a sharp spasm shot through his back, nearly causing him to gasp. The hours of sitting had taken their toll, despite the medication. For an instant, panic flared. If he couldn't maintain proper form through the technically demanding solo, Victoria's prediction of failure would be realized. In that moment of crisis, his eyes found his parents in the audience. His mother's encouraging smile. His father's proud nod. Behind them, inexplicably, sat the elegant older woman he'd noticed earlier. Now he recognized her. Dr. Eleanor Blackwood, 20 years older but unmistakable. The shock nearly paralyzed him. Why was she here? How had she found him after all these years? There was no time to process the questions. Victoria raised her baton, and the orchestra began the introduction. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, centering himself despite the pain, despite the shock of seeing his childhood tormentor. When the moment came for his solo entrance, Marcus poured everything into the music, the years of struggle, his parents' sacrifices, the constant battle to prove himself worthy in spaces designed to exclude him. The pain in his back became part of the performance, lending urgency and emotional depth to each phrase. The Tchaikovsky concerto tells a story of triumph over adversity, of beauty emerging from struggle. As Marcus played, the narrative became his own. His bow danced across the strings with both technical brilliance and raw emotional honesty that transcended classical convention. Halfway through, he noticed Victoria's rigid conducting softening, following his interpretation rather than forcing him to follow hers. The orchestra responded, elevating their performance to match his passion. When the final note resonated through the hall, a moment of profound silence followed, that magical space between performance and response when an audience collectively holds its breath, reluctant to break the spell. Then came the applause, not polite appreciation but a thunderous standing ovation that rolled through the opera house like a wave. Marcus stood, acknowledging the audience, his eyes meeting Dr. Blackwood's. Her face shone with tears, one hand covering her mouth. Victoria gestured for Marcus to take a solo bow. As he stepped forward, he saw his mother weeping openly, his father standing tall beside her, applause unwavering. Critics scribbled frantically in notepads. The board chairman beamed. Later, Marcus would remember little of the reception that followed, a blur of congratulations, business cards from conductors, and champagne toasts. What remained crystal clear was Victoria approaching him, expression inscrutable. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice carrying above the celebratory noise. "I owe you an apology." The surrounding conversations hushed. "For what, specifically?" Marcus asked, aware they had an audience. "For judging your ability based on factors other than your talent." Victoria's admission appeared physically painful. "Your performance tonight was extraordinary." Before Marcus could respond, Dr. Blackwood appeared at his elbow, aged but immediately recognizable. "Marcus Reynolds," she said, voice trembling. "You probably don't remember me." "I remember you perfectly, Dr. Blackwood," he replied, his tone carefully neutral despite the emotions churning beneath the surface. Victoria glanced between them, confusion evident. "I was Marcus's teacher at Westfield Academy," Dr. Blackwood explained. "Many years ago. She was the one who injured my back," Marcus added quietly. "The injury I still carry today." Dr. Blackwood's eyes filled with tears. I've spent years trying to find you, to make amends. When I saw your name in the program. The three of them stood frozen in a moment heavy with history, pain, and the possibility of redemption, connected by music and the long shadow of prejudice. Director Jonathan Pierce of the National Symphony Orchestra wasted no time approaching Marcus after his performance. That interpretation of Tchaikovsky was revelatory, he declared, pressing his card into Marcus's hand. We should discuss your future plans. Marcus accepted the card, still dazed from the emotional intensity of the evening. Thank you, sir. That's very kind. Not kindness, recognition of exceptional talent, Pierce corrected. The classical world needs fresh perspectives like yours. As Pierce moved away, Marcus found himself face to face with Dr. Blackwood. 20 years had softened her appearance but not erased the features that had haunted his nightmares. I don't expect forgiveness, she said quietly. What I did was unforgivable. Why are you here? Marcus asked, struggling to reconcile her presence with the memories that had shaped his life. I read about the Wellington anniversary in the Times. When I saw your name. She hesitated. I've followed your career since you left Westfield. Watched from a distance as you overcame the obstacles I helped create. Marcus remained silent, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected confrontation with his past. I'm dying, Dr. Blackwood continued matter-of-factly. Cancer. It has a way of forcing reflection on one's life. I'm sorry to hear that, Marcus said, surprised to find he meant it. Don't be. It's given me clarity. She met his gaze directly. I was wrong, Marcus. Not just in how I treated you, but in everything I believed about who belongs in classical music. Your performance tonight proved that beyond any doubt. Before Marcus could respond, his parents appeared. Mrs. Reynolds enveloped him in a careful embrace, mindful of his back. My beautiful boy, she whispered. You showed them all. His father squeezed his shoulder, eyes suspiciously bright. Proud of you, son. When they noticed Dr. Blackwood, Mrs. Reynolds stiffened. You, she said, recognition and old anger flashing across her face. Mrs. Reynolds, Dr. Blackwood acknowledged. Mr. Reynolds. You raised an extraordinary son. No thanks to you, Mrs. Reynolds replied coldly. Marcus touched his mother's arm gently. It's all right, Mama. Dr. Blackwood was just leaving. Understanding his need for closure, his parents stepped away, though his mother watched Dr. Blackwood like a hawk. I established a scholarship, Dr. Blackwood said quickly. For minority students in classical music. It's anonymous, but it bears your initials. It's not enough, I know, but it's a start, Marcus interrupted. Thank you for telling me. She nodded, accepting the limited absolution he offered. You play beautifully, Marcus. You always did. With that, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Victoria approached next, her usual imperious demeanor subdued. The board chairman is arranging a permanent position for you, she informed him. First violin. And how do you feel about that? Marcus asked directly. I feel. Victoria chose her words carefully, that the Wellington will benefit from your talent. And perhaps from your perspective as well. It wasn't quite an apology or an admission of prejudice, but from Victoria Wellington, it represented monumental change. Thank you, Marcus said simply. Victoria hesitated, then added, You're back, Dr. Blackwood mentioned an injury. Is that why you never sit properly during rehearsals? Marcus nodded. 2 slipped discs, improperly healed. Sitting for extended periods is challenging. The Wellington can arrange accommodations, Victoria said stiffly. A different chair, break schedules. You should have mentioned it. Would it have mattered before tonight? Marcus asked. Victoria's silence was answer enough. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Thomas found Marcus alone in the practice room, carefully returning the Testor violin to its case. The conquering hero, Thomas teased gently. Every critic in attendance is writing about the brilliant black violinist who redefined Tchaikovsky. Marcus smiled tiredly. One performance doesn't change the world, Thomas. Perhaps not. But it changes the conversation. Thomas sat beside him. Victoria is speaking with the board about implementing a community outreach program. Your performance inspired quite a lot of donor interest in supporting diverse classical training. Really? Marcus looked up in surprise. Thomas nodded. You've created a crack in a very old foundation, my friend. Others will widen it until the walls come down entirely. As Marcus closed the violin case, Sophia burst in, waving her phone excitedly. The Times already posted online. Reynolds brings fresh urgency to Tchaikovsky, challenging conventional interpretation with emotional authenticity rarely seen in classical performance. They're calling you revolutionary. Marcus laughed, overwhelmed by the day's events. I just played what I felt. That's precisely what made it revolutionary, Thomas said quietly. Later, walking toward the exit with his parents, Marcus passed Victoria's office. The door stood open, revealing Victoria seated before her damaged Guarneri, examining the minute crack with evident distress. Marcus paused. It can be repaired, he offered. The soul of the instrument remains intact. Victoria looked up, startled. Yes, she agreed after a moment. Though it will never be quite the same. Sometimes the repairs become part of the instrument's story, Marcus suggested. Making it more unique, not less valuable. Victoria regarded him thoughtfully. Perhaps you're right, Mr. Reynolds. Perhaps you're right. As Marcus stepped into the cool night air, his parents on either side, he realized something profound had shifted, not just in his career, but in the institutions he'd fought so long to enter. The pain in his back remained, as did the memories of past injuries, but they no longer defined his future. What happens now? His father asked practically. Marcus smiled, gazing up at the stars above the Manhattan skyline. Now we play a new composition. One note at a time. Social awareness message. Dear friend, music isn't defined by background, race, or social status. It's a universal language that speaks most powerfully when diverse voices contribute. Marcus's journey reminds us that talent deserves recognition regardless of who performs it, and that the barriers facing black artists in traditionally exclusive spaces are very real but can be overcome. We all have the power to challenge prejudice when we see it and to support those fighting for their rightful place in any field. Your own journey might not involve a violin, but we all face moments where standing up for ourselves becomes necessary, no matter how painful. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to support more content celebrating resilience, talent, and the breaking of barriers.